Story 1, Star Wars. I was 8. They messed the sound up really badly, so we got free tickets to see it again. This was the Cecil Theater in Hull in 1977. Story 2, An American Tale, 1986. But I think it was released as Fievel, een avontuur met een starch in the Netherlands. Story 3, I'm 58, so for me it was Disney's Robin Hood, where animated foxes were Robin Hood and Maid Marian. Sorry, this was the first movie I remember going to the movie theater to see. Story 4, I am so old looking at all these answers. Sound of Music. My dad took my little sister and me. We had matching polka dot dresses. He took all the black jelly beans out so we did not get them dirty. What a wonderful memory. Story 5, I remember going to the movie theater before this, but the first film I can name that I saw was 101 Dalmatians. Story 6, Anastasia scared the life out of me when Rasputin had his skin peeled off for a split second, and my mom had to escort me outside so I could cry. Story 7, Opening night of The Spy Who Loved Me. It was the Queen's Silver Jubilee year, and national pride and patriotism were at an all-time high in the United Kingdom. When James Bond goes off the cliff at the beginning and the Union flag parachute opens, it was the only time I have ever seen a standing ovation with people clapping and cheering in a movie theater. It was completely unexpected and amazing. Yes, it is not my favorite movie for banking information, in case you were wondering. Story 8, Hercules, but Pocahontas was pretty close behind. Edit. I realized that's the other way around, and it's also not that close behind. Story 9, Annie with my grandma. I remember her looking at me with joy that we were experiencing my first movie together. She was the best. Story 10, Tarzan, the animated movie. I saw it at the discount theater and cried like a baby. My mom made us leave, but she wasn't mad. She felt bad that I was sad. My siblings still tease me for it. Story 11, Finding Nemo on my 5th birthday with my dad. I still have the ticket stubs. It is such a great memory. I had to sit on his lap because I was not heavy enough to hold the seat down. I also remember he had to put me on his shoulders and rush to an automated teller machine to get cash because the theater did not take card. I thought that was so fun. Story 12, in 2001, I was about 5 or 6 years old. I begged my mom to take me, and she did. I had no idea what was going on except for the word space. The Star Child scared me quite a bit. Story 13, Annie went with my aunt, who took me. She was a teenager at the time, and I was about 5 years old. It was entertaining at that age, but not life-changing. The next one was E.T. Now that one blew me away. Story 14, the first movie I ever watched was Star Wars. I was 4 years old. My dad and stepmom took me to the Uptown Theater in Georgetown, Washington, D.C. We sat in the front row balcony seats. I am 52 now and remember every moment of that adventure. Story 15, 101 Dalmatians, released in 1996. I was 3 years old. My mom bought me this cookies and cream Hershey's bar, which was very unpleasant. Story 16, not in a theater but 2001, A Space Odyssey at a drive-in. I was probably about 5. Still one of my favorites. Story 17, Batteries Not Included. My mom took me to see it at a drive-in as a little kid in the early 1990s. One of my fondest memories. Story 18, Star Wars Episode 2. Little did I know I would later form my entire personality around Star Wars. Thank you, Mom and Dad. Story 19, Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron. My older brother took me and our younger sibling to see it when I was 10 and our little sibling was 8. It was the first time the two of us younger ones had ever been to the cinema, so we were very excited. It is a great movie, and I still love it to this day. My brother also liked it, which worked out well, as he was just humoring us by choosing that movie. He has taken me to a bunch of random movies over the years, but I'll never forget the first one. Story 20. Oh my gosh, I'm so old. The Sting with Robert Redford. Slinks off to bed to cry at the unfairness of aging. Story 21. I have apparently seen movies before this one in theaters, but I do not remember them. The first I remember is Night at the Museum. A new Grand Theater had just opened with a restaurant, and we ate there for dinner as well. Story 22, Jurassic Park. I was 2 or 3 years old, and to this day, I have a reoccurring dream that I am being hunted by velociraptors. Story 23, Toy Story. It still remains my comfort movie. It was the first time my parents had the money for something fun, and my parents took my baby brother and me to see it. One of my best memories. The last movie I saw with my dad was Monsters Incorporated. We both cried at the ending. When he passed away, I can't even look at it without crying. I miss you, Dad. Story 24. Point of No Return, Bridget Fonda, and I forget the others, but they are recognizable. Dermot Mulroney, I think. The script was originally for La Femme Nikita but was turned into a standalone film. I think it was in 1991 or 1993. I would have been about 6 or 7. I loved it then, and it definitely established a trend for me to really enjoy female action leads. Story 25. The Exorcist, the original 1980s movie. My mom thought it would be fun for a 3-year-old. Now I let Jesus guide me. Story 26. I saw Star Wars, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and Airport 1977. I honestly do not remember going to a movie prior to that. I was 11. Story 27. I know it wasn't the first one I saw in a theater, but the first one I remember was Homeward Bound. The reason I mainly remember is that the theater was evacuated due to a fire. Story 28. I am not sure what the order is, and my parents probably would not remember either by now, but I have memories of seeing both E.T. and Return of the Jedi in our local second-run theater, and Snow White at the drive-in, which was double-featured with Tron. However, I either fell asleep or we left before Tron was over. One of those was first, and I am more inclined to think it was either Snow White or E.T., and Return of the Jedi was the third. Story 29. Bambi. My mom took me to a theater in Mexico City that was showing Disney classics. I must have been about 5 or 6 years old. Story 30. When I was a child, my mother dropped me off at the theater so I could watch all the Planet of the Apes movies in one day. The original ones. Yes, I am old. It was so cool. Story 31. Oh my gosh, my dad took me to see Every Which Way But Loose with Clint Eastwood when I was about 7 years old. The only part one remember enjoying was Clyde the orangutan. I do not recall going to another movie until I was probably 15 when I saw Stand By Me. Story 32. Star Wars. Although technically that was the drive-in. In a theater, Every Which Way But Loose. The Clint Eastwood and an orangutan movie. Story 33. Jaws changed the way I looked at any body of water for a long time. I had a cousin who almost convinced me that there were pool sharks in his family's pool. I was 6. Story 34. Pokemon. The first movie. I think we received Mew cards as well. I thought they handed out Pokemon cards for it, but I was barely of preschool age, so I might be misremembering. Story 35. The Fish That Saved Pittsburgh. I was 4 years old. I hated the idea of going to the movies for years. That movie, in my head, was 45 years long. Story 36. Disney's Tarzan. The theater is a historic building, so the screen was actually behind a red curtain that would be pulled a few minutes before the previews. Definitely a core memory. Story 37. 101 Dalmatians. 1996. I disliked it because I thought the dogs would talk like they do in the animated version. Story 38. Jurassic Park. I was 13 or 14, depending on when it was actually released here in the Netherlands. Story 39. Star Wars Episode 3. My brother had just gotten his license, and I was old enough that my parents were okay with him taking me to the midnight showing. There is a significant age gap between us, so it was one of the few times when he wasn't too cool to hang out with his younger brother. It is a good memory. Story 40. Honey. I Shrunk the Kids back in 1989. My parents decided my brother and I were finally old enough to go to the theaters. I was 8 and he was 5. Story 41. Titanic. I was in elementary school and I remember feeling very uncomfortable seeing a naked woman on the screen. Story 42. Oddly enough, The Last of the Mohicans. I was way too young to be in a rated R movie, but it was filmed primarily in the Blue Ridge Parkway near Asheville, North Carolina, as well as having some scenes from the bridges on the outskirts of the Biltmore. My grandfather built a family vacation home in Brevard, North Carolina, and we loved seeing it on the big screen. I know I saw movies before this, such as Home Alone and The Little Mermaid, but The Last of the Mohicans, I will always remember. Story 43, 101 Dalmatians. They played it at a 99-cent second time around movie theater in our town. My mom and I were the only ones in the theater, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Story 44. I am not certain if it was my very first experience ever going to a movie theater. However, it is at least the first experience that I remember. I was a teenager and went a total of 4 times to see Titanic. I had such a crush on Leonardo DiCaprio during that time. I remember my dad giving me money the first time I went with my best friend, and the 3 other times I begged my parents to do chores around the house to earn allowance money just to go back and see Leonardo again. The things you remember. I remember my parents purchasing me a movie poster of Titanic for my bedroom wall, and I was thrilled. Story 45, 8 seconds. The whole theater was trying not to cry at the first picture of the real Lane Frost. 8-year-old me lost it, which made the whole theater cry and earned me so many hugs. I watched that VHS over and over again and broke 2 of them. The second movie I saw was Titanic. Story 46. Chicken Little. I had no idea my mom was going to take us to the Spanish movie theater to watch it in Spanish either. Story 47. Jurassic Park. I was sitting in my mom's lap for some of it, hiding my face because of how scary the Tyrannosaurus Rex was. I was 4. Story 48. Star Trek. First Contact. My mom took me when I was really young, and it was the most awesome thing I have ever seen. I have been a full-on nerd ever since. Story 49. Footloose. I was about 4, my sister was 14, and she was babysitting me while dragging me on a date with her. She sat me in the seat in front of her. I remember feeling confused, horrified, and entertained by the movie. Story 50. The tiniest memory of arriving at the theater for Beauty and the Beast, only to hear an announcement that it was sold out. I walked in only to immediately leave. Story 51. My baby book says my parents took me to the movies at 6 months old when the babysitter canceled. It was the first Indiana Jones movie. Story 52. Monsters Incorporated. I saw it with my mom and didn't understand the concept of a movie theater. So when we were walking out, I said I liked it and we should buy it on VHS because I assumed we were watching a preview to see if we wanted to take home a copy. Story 53. Titanic in 1997 at 12 years old. We were fresh out of a religious cult that didn't allow television, movies, pre-recorded music of any kind, computers, and so on. It was the new blockbuster showing on the big screen in our small town's theater. Needless to say, Titanic blew my entire family's tiny minds and was a religious experience in a very different way. Story 54. A live-action Cinderella where the stepsisters cut their toes off to fit the shoe, and a dove cooed, "Coo, coo, there's blood on the shoe." This would have been in 1968 or 1969. Story 55. The first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie was released in 1990. I know it wasn't the first movie I ever saw in the theater, but it is the first one I specifically remember seeing. I was 9 years old and completely blown away. I still get a little thrill whenever I see the New Line Cinema logo on the screen. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.